The sound of Kelly's laughter drifting through the garage wall at 2 a.m. should have been my first clue that my marriage was already over. I was underneath my battered F-150, wrestling with a transmission leak that had been bleeding fluid all over our driveway for weeks, when her voice cut through the thin drywall like a rusty blade. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I swear, Lacey, it's like being married to a broken-down pickup truck. All noise, no performance, and constantly leaking something. I froze, wrench in hand, transmission fluid dripping onto my forehead. The speakerphone carried every word with crystal clarity. At least Vaughn knows how to handle his equipment, Kelly continued, and both women dissolved into giggles that made my stomach turn. God, the difference is like comparing a thoroughbred to a plow horse. Lacey's voice joined in, sharp and encouraging. You deserve so much better, Kel. Adam's been holding you back for years. Remember when he had that little company? Even then, he was all talk. I slid out from under the truck, my work clothes soaked in oil and humiliation. Through the thin wall, I could hear my 16-year-old daughter Tessa's voice from the living room. Mom, you're being super loud. I'm trying to make a TikTok. Sorry, honey, Kelly called back, not sounding sorry at all. Just catching up with Aunt Lacey about grown-up stuff. Grown-up stuff. Right. I wiped the grease from my hands with a rag that had seen better decades, just like everything else in my life. My small financial consulting business had been circling the drain for months while Kelly's event planning career soared. She'd started calling herself a luxury experience designer, whatever the hell that meant. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 years ago, I'd fired Lacey from my company for creative differences, mainly her creative approach to expense reports and my difference of opinion about embezzlement. Now she was Kelly's business partner and apparently her relationship counselor too. I pressed my ear to the wall, hating myself for eavesdropping but unable to stop. The best part, Kelly was saying, is that Adam actually thinks I'm at those late client meetings, like I'd spend my evenings picking out centerpieces when I could be with someone who actually appreciates me. Does he suspect anything? Lacey asked. Are you kidding? He's so buried in his failing little business and that pathetic truck, he wouldn't notice if I brought Vaughn home for dinner. Besides, look at him. When's the last time you saw Adam without grease under his fingernails or wearing something that wasn't from Walmart? The conversation drifted toward logistics. Which hotels had the most discreet parking, which restaurants were safe for business dinners, how to explain the new lingerie as a confidence boost for client presentations. Each detail was another nail in the coffin of my marriage, and they were hammering them in with the enthusiasm of home improvement show hosts. I stumbled back to my truck, but the transmission leak seemed less important now. Everything felt less important. 22 years of marriage, and I'd become the punchline to my wife's jokes and the obstacle to her happiness. My phone buzzed. A text from Mike Kowalski, my old friend who ran the boxing gym downtown. Haven't seen you in weeks. Everything good? Everything was definitely not good, but I wasn't ready to admit that yet, not even to myself. The next morning, Kelly breezed through the kitchen like she owned the world, which, according to her phone conversation, she basically did. She wore a designer dress that cost more than my monthly truck payment, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite allegedly working until midnight on a difficult client. Morning, she said without looking up from her phone. I've got 3 consultations today and dinner with the Morrison wedding party. Don't wait up. Tessa slouched at the breakfast table, scrolling through her phone with the dedication of a scholar studying ancient texts. She'd inherited Kelly's sharp features and my stubborn streak, though lately the stubbornness seemed directed exclusively at me. Dad, you look like hell, she said, without glancing up. Maybe try sleeping in a bed instead of under that piece of junk truck. Good morning to you too, sunshine. Kelly finally looked at me, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or just annoyance that I existed in her perfect morning routine. You should really consider selling that truck, Adam. It's becoming an eyesore. It's becoming a lot of things, I muttered, but she was already heading for the door. Oh, and Lacey's coming by later to pick up some files. Try to be presentable. The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone with Tessa and the lingering scent of Kelly's expensive perfume. The same perfume she'd apparently been wearing to impress someone who wasn't her husband. Tessa finally looked up from her phone. Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced? The question hit me like a sucker punch. Why would you ask that? She shrugged, the universal teenage gesture that could mean anything from, I don't know, to, I know everything and you're an idiot. You guys haven't talked to each other in, forever. And Mom's been super weird lately. Happy, but fake happy. Smart kid. Too smart for her own good, and definitely too smart to be fooled by whatever performance Kelly and I had been putting on. We're just going through a rough patch, I said, the lie tasting bitter in my mouth. Whatever. Just don't make it weird for my friends, okay? Jenny's parents had this massive public divorce, and now everyone treats her like she's contagious. She went back to her phone, dismissing me and my marital problems with the casual cruelty that only teenagers can master. But her words stuck with me. Public divorce, public humiliation. The thought of becoming the subject of small-town gossip made my skin crawl. Our town wasn't small enough for everyone to know everyone, but it was small enough for everyone to know everyone's business. Especially when that business involved the wife of a failed entrepreneur running around with a personal trainer who looked like he'd been carved out of marble by someone with a serious Greek mythology fetish. I spent the morning trying to focus on work, reviewing financial reports for a client who probably wouldn't pay me for another 60 days. But Kelly's conversation kept playing in my head like a song I couldn't shake. The casual cruelty of it, the way she'd reduced our entire marriage to a series of mechanical metaphors, the laughter that followed each insult. Around noon, Lacey showed up. She knocked on the door like she owned the place, which, given her influence over my wife, maybe she did. Adam, she said with the kind of bright smile that made me want to check my wallet. Kelly said you'd be here. Just need to grab some files from her office. Lacey Chen. Sorry. Lacey Morrison now, after her third marriage, had always been trouble. Even back when I'd hired her, there'd been something calculating about the way she approached every situation. She was attractive in a sharp, predatory way, with dark hair cut in a severe bob and clothes that screamed expensive but not flashy. She's not here, I said, stepping aside to let her in. I know. That's why I came now. She brushed past me, trailing some perfume that probably cost more per ounce than my truck was worth. We need to talk. The words sent a chill down my spine. Nothing good ever started with, we need to talk, especially from someone I'd fired for stealing from my company. She settled onto our couch like she belonged there, crossing her legs and fixing me with a stare that felt like a challenge. Kelly's been worried about you. Has she now? She thinks you might be having some kind of breakdown. The late nights in the garage, the obsession with that truck, the way you've been looking at her lately. Lacey tilted her head, studying me like I was a particularly interesting insect. She's concerned. I sat down across from her, keeping the coffee table between us like a barrier. And what do you think? I think you're not as stupid as Kelly believes you are. The admission hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I wasn't sure I wanted to unpack. Lacey leaned forward, her expression shifting from fake concern to something more honest and infinitely more dangerous. Here's the thing, Adam. Kelly's happy right now. Happier than she's been in years. She's got a thriving business. She's got someone who appreciates her. And she's got a future that doesn't involve watching you tinker with broken-down machinery in a garage that smells like failure. Each word was carefully chosen, precisely aimed to cause maximum damage. I had to admire the craftsmanship, even as it tore me apart. So, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you make this easy on everyone. File for divorce, take your fair share, and let Kelly move on with her life. Vaughn's already talking about making things official, and honestly, they make a beautiful couple. The name hit me like a physical blow. Vaughn. I'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed made everything real in a way that phone conversations and circumstantial evidence couldn't. Vaughn Richardson? I asked, though I already knew the answer. There was only one Vaughn in our town who fit Kelly's thoroughbred description, the personal trainer at the upscale gym where Kelly had suddenly developed a passion for fitness. He's good for her, Lacey said simply. Better than you've been in a long time. I stood up, needing to move, needing to do something with the rage that was building in my chest, like steam in a pressure cooker. Get out! Adam, get out of my house. Now. She stood gracefully, smoothing down her skirt with hands that didn't shake. Unlike mine. I'm trying to help you here. This doesn't have to get ugly. It's already ugly. She paused at the door, looking back at me with something that might have been pity if I didn't know better. Kelly's not the same woman you married, Adam. She's evolved. Maybe it's time you did the same. After she left, I sat in my living room for a long time, staring at the family photos on the mantel. Kelly and me on our wedding day, young and stupid and convinced we'd figured out something that had stumped couples for millennia. Tessa as a baby, as a toddler, as a kid who still thought her dad was a hero instead of a punchline. When had it all gone wrong? When had I become the villain in my own life story? My phone buzzed. A text from Kelly. Working late again. Vaughn's helping with the Morrison wedding setup. Don't wait up. Vaughn's helping. Right. I was sure he was helping with something, just not wedding planning. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. If Kelly wanted to play games, fine. But I was done being the only one who didn't know the rules. The Riverside Motel sat on the wrong side of town, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask too many questions about why married women showed up with men who weren't their husbands. I'd driven past it 1,000 times without really seeing it, but now it felt like the center of my universe. Kelly's BMW was parked in the back, next to a red Camaro that screamed midlife crisis and overcompensation. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, engine running, trying to decide what I was going to do with the confirmation of what I already knew. The smart thing would be to drive home, call a lawyer, and start the process of dividing up 22 years of shared mistakes. The mature thing would be to confront Kelly privately, have an adult conversation about our marriage, and work toward an amicable separation. Instead, I grabbed the tire iron from behind my seat and got to work on the Camaro. It was therapeutic in a way I hadn't expected. Each puncture released a little bit of the pressure that had been building in my chest since last night's phone conversation. The hiss of escaping air sounded like justice, or at least like a down payment on it. I left a note under the windshield wiper. Next time, I'll shred more than your rubber. The motel room was on the second floor, and I could see shadows moving behind the thin curtains. Part of me wanted to kick down the door, to confront them in the middle of their betrayal and force them to face what they'd done to my family. But a bigger part of me wanted to make them sweat first. I was halfway across the parking lot when I heard footsteps behind me. Hey! Hey, you! The motel security guard was built like a refrigerator and moved with the determined shuffle of someone who'd dealt with plenty of parking lot drama. I didn't wait around to explain my automotive vandalism. The fire escape was 20 feet away, and I'd been working out at Mike's gym long enough to still move when I needed to. I made it to my truck and out of the parking lot before the guard reached the Camaro, but my hands were shaking as I drove home. Not from fear, from adrenaline, and something that felt suspiciously like joy. For the first time in months, maybe years, I'd done something instead of just letting life happen to me. The feeling lasted exactly until I checked my phone the next morning. Someone had filmed me leaving the motel. The video was grainy and shot from a distance, but it was clearly me, clearly my truck, and clearly the scene of a crime. It had been posted to the town's gossip blog, River City Confidential, with the headline, "Local Man's Midnight Motel Meltdown." The comments were brutal. "Isn't that Adam Porter? Heard his wife's been stepping out. Maybe if he spent less time vandalizing cars and more time taking care of his woman. That truck's been leaking oil all over Maple Street for months. Now we know what else he's been leaking." I was officially the town's latest entertainment, and the show was just getting started. Kelly didn't come home that night, or the next morning. She finally showed up around noon, looking like she'd spent the night in a hotel room instead of sleeping on her business partner's couch, which was the story she texted me at 3 a.m. "We need to talk," she said, and there were those 4 words again, the ominous warning that had been echoing through my life lately. She sat down at the kitchen table, still wearing yesterday's clothes, and fixed me with a look that was part guilt, part defiance, and part something I couldn't identify. Maybe relief. "I know you were at the motel," she said. "I know you were too." We stared at each other across the table, 22 years of marriage reduced to a standoff between 2 people who'd forgotten how to be honest with each other. "How long?" I asked. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." She sighed, running her hands through her hair in a gesture I'd once found endearing. Now it just looked calculated, like she was buying time to craft the perfect response. 6 months, she said finally. Maybe 7. 7 months. While I'd been struggling to keep my business afloat, while I'd been working 16-hour days trying to provide for my family, while I'd been beating myself up for not being the husband she deserved, she'd been auditioning my replacement. "Why?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Because you stopped trying," she said, and there was real anger in her voice now. "When's the last time you took me out to dinner? When's the last time you bought me flowers or told me I looked beautiful, or acted like you were glad to be married to me instead of just resigned to it? When's the last time you gave me a reason to?" The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. Kelly's face flushed, and for a moment I saw a flash of the woman I'd married. Passionate, fierce, unafraid to fight for what she wanted. "That's exactly what I'm talking about," she said. "Everything is my fault. Everything is my responsibility. I'm supposed to be grateful that you show up, that you pay the bills, that you exist in the same space as me. Well, I'm tired of being grateful for the bare minimum." "The bare minimum?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "I've worked my ass off for this family. I've sacrificed everything I wanted to give you and Tessa a good life. No, you've sacrificed everything you wanted to give yourself an excuse for failure. It's easier to blame your family for holding you back than to admit you're just not that good at what you do." The words hit like a physical blow, mainly because there was enough truth in them to sting. My business was failing, had been failing for years. I'd been telling myself it was because I was too focused on my family to properly network, too ethical to play the games that successful consultants played, too devoted to be the kind of husband and father who put work first. But maybe Kelly was right. Maybe I was just not that good at what I did. "So you decided to find someone who was better at what they do," I said. "I decided to find someone who made me feel like I was worth the effort." Tessa chose that moment to walk into the kitchen, earbuds in, phone in hand, completely oblivious to the fact that she was witnessing the end of her parents' marriage. She grabbed a yogurt from the fridge and started to leave, then paused and looked back at us. "Are you guys fighting about Dad's motel thing?" she asked, pulling out one earbud. "Because everyone at school is talking about it. Jenny said her mom saw the video and thinks Dad's having a midlife crisis." Kelly and I stared at our daughter, both of us realizing simultaneously that our private disaster had become public entertainment. "It's fine, honey," Kelly said. "Just a misunderstanding." Whatever. Tessa put her earbud back in. Just don't make it weird for my friends, okay? I already told you that. She left, and Kelly and I were alone again with the wreckage of our marriage and the knowledge that half the town was watching us implode. I want a divorce, Kelly said quietly. I figured. I want to do this amicably, for Tessa's sake. I almost laughed. Amicably. Like there was anything amicable about discovering your wife's affair through late-night phone conversations and motel parking lots. Like there was anything friendly about being humiliated in front of the entire town. What does amicably mean to you? I asked. It means we split things fairly. It means we don't drag each other through court or try to turn Tessa against each other. It means we act like adults. And it means you get to ride off into the sunset with Vaughn without looking like the bad guy. Her jaw tightened. This isn't about Vaughn. Bullshit. This is entirely about Vaughn and Lacey and whatever game you two have been playing behind my back. Lacey's been a good friend to me. She's helped me realize that I deserve better than this. Kelly gestured around the kitchen, taking in the outdated appliances, the worn linoleum, the general air of making do that had characterized our life together. She's helped you realize that you can trade up. Maybe I can. Maybe I should have years ago. We stared at each other across a gulf that felt unbridgeable, and I realized that the woman sitting across from me wasn't the person I'd married. That woman had been kind, even when she was angry. She'd been cruel sometimes, but never cold. This Kelly was someone else entirely, someone harder, more calculating, more willing to burn down everything we'd built together if it meant getting what she wanted. Fine, I said. You want a divorce? You got it. But don't expect me to make it easy for you. Adam? You want to play games? Let's play games. You want to air our dirty laundry in public? Let's see how much dirty laundry you're comfortable with everyone seeing. I left her sitting at the kitchen table and went to my office to call a lawyer. But first, I made a stop at my computer and started doing what I should have done months ago, paying attention to the details of my own life. Bank statements, credit card bills, phone records, social media posts, all the digital breadcrumbs that people leave behind when they think no one is watching. Kelly had been sloppy, overconfident in my obliviousness, and the evidence of her affair was everywhere once I knew what to look for. Hotel charges on our joint credit card, explained as client meetings, purchases from Victoria's Secret, justified as confidence boosters for presentations, gym membership fees that had mysteriously doubled when she'd started taking her fitness seriously. But the real gold mine was her cloud storage account, which she'd never bothered to password protect because she'd never imagined I'd be smart enough or motivated enough to look. Photos, videos, text message screenshots, a complete record of her relationship with Vaughn, including some images that made me want to throw my computer through the window. Worse than the explicit photos were the conversations, Kelly and Vaughn mocking my appearance, my performance, my prospects. Kelly and Lacey planning elaborate lies to cover their tracks. A group chat that included several of Kelly's friends, all of them treating my humiliation like entertainment. The worst was a video Kelly had apparently taken without my knowledge. Me getting out of the shower, completely unaware I was being filmed, while she provided sarcastic commentary about my physical shortcomings. The video had been shared with the group chat, generating dozens of laughing emoji and comments that made me feel sick. I was still staring at the screen when my phone rang. Mike from the gym. Jesus Christ, Adam. What the hell is going on? I just saw some video online. Which video? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. Someone posted that motel thing to Facebook. It's got like 200 shares already. Great. My humiliation had gone viral, at least by small-town standards. By tomorrow, everyone in the city would know that Adam Porter had been caught vandalizing his wife's boyfriend's car in a motel parking lot. I need to hit something, I told Mike. Get down here. I'll set up the heavy bag. The gym was exactly what I needed. Dark, loud, and honest. No pretense, no games, just the simple equation of effort and results. Mike had owned the place for 15 years, ever since his own boxing career had ended with a detached retina and a wake-up call about mortality. He was waiting for me with gloves and hand wraps, his scarred face set in an expression of grim sympathy. "Talk," he said, starting to wrap my hands with the efficiency of someone who'd done this thousands of times. I told him everything. The phone conversation, the affair, the confrontation with Kelly, the evidence I'd found on her computer. Mike listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or grunting in acknowledgement. "How long have you known?" he asked when I finished. "Suspected? Months. Known for sure? 2 days. And what do you want to do about it?" I thought about it while he finished wrapping my hands. What did I want? I wanted my marriage back, but that was impossible. I wanted Kelly to be the woman I'd married, but that woman might never have existed. I wanted to not be the town laughingstock, but that ship had already sailed. "I want them to hurt the way I'm hurting," I said finally. Mike nodded like this was a perfectly reasonable response. "Then let's figure out how to make that happen. But first, let's work on your right hook. You're gonna need it." I spent 2 hours beating the hell out of Mike's heavy bag, and by the time I was done, I had a plan. It wasn't a good plan, and it probably wasn't a smart plan, but it was a plan that would make me feel better, and right now, that was enough. The first step was Tessa's school fundraiser, scheduled for the following Friday. Kelly had volunteered to help with decorations naturally, and she'd mentioned that Vaughn would be there as a volunteer coordinator, which I now understood meant Kelly's date in a public setting where they could pretend to be professional. I'd been planning to skip the event, but now it seemed like the perfect opportunity to make a statement. The fundraiser was held in the school auditorium, transformed into a carnival, complete with game booths, food trucks, and a dunking booth that was already drawing a crowd of kids eager to see their teachers get soaked. Kelly was in her element, directing volunteers and adjusting decorations with the kind of focused intensity she'd once brought to our relationship. She looked beautiful, I had to admit. She'd always been attractive, but lately there was something different about her. A confidence, a glow that I now realized had nothing to do with me, and everything to do with the man standing beside her, holding a clipboard, and looking like he'd stepped out of a fitness magazine. Vaughn Richardson was everything I wasn't. Tall where I was average, muscled where I was soft, confident where I was uncertain. He moved through the crowd like he owned the place, shaking hands and flashing smiles that made the other volunteers giggle like teenagers. I watched them work together, Kelly touching his arm to get his attention, Vaughn leaning close to whisper something that made her laugh. They looked like a couple, which I suppose they were, even if only half the room knew it yet. "Dad?" Tessa appeared beside me, looking uncomfortable. "What are you doing here?" "Supporting my daughter's school," I said. "Why? Is that weird?" "Everything you do is weird lately." She glanced toward Kelly and Vaughn, then back at me. "Are you going to make a scene?" "What makes you think I'd make a scene?" "The way you're staring at Mom and her friend. Everyone's talking about it, you know. About you and Mom and the motel thing. Let them talk." "Easy for you to say. You don't have to go to school here." She had a point, but I was past caring about making things easy for anyone. Kelly had made her choice, and now everyone else would have to live with the consequences. I made my way through the crowd, stopping at various booths, making small talk with other parents who looked at me with expressions ranging from sympathy to curiosity to barely concealed amusement. Word had definitely gotten around about my motel adventure, and I could feel the weight of their attention like a physical thing. Finally, I approached the volunteer coordination table, where Vaughn was holding court, explaining the evening's schedule to a group of parent volunteers, with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for cult leaders and pyramid scheme recruiters. "Vaughn Richardson, right?" I said, extending my hand. "Adam Porter. I don't think we've been formally introduced." He looked up, and I saw recognition flicker in his eyes, followed quickly by something that might have been fear or might have been excitement. He was younger than I'd expected, probably early 30s, with the kind of artificial tan that came from spending too much time under UV lights. "Adam," he said, taking my hand in a grip that was just a little too firm, a little too long. "Good to finally meet you. Kelly's told me so much about you." "I'll bet she has." We stared at each other for a moment, and I could see him calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much trouble he was in. The other volunteers had gone quiet, sensing drama in the way that crowds always do. "Actually," I said, raising my voice just enough to ensure everyone could hear, "I wanted to thank you for all the help you've been giving Kelly with her projects. She's been working so many late nights lately. It's nice to know she has such a dedicated partner." The word partner hung in the air like a challenge, and I saw Vaughn's face flush slightly. Kelly appeared at his side as if summoned, her smile bright and brittle. "Adam," she said, "I didn't expect to see you here." "Wouldn't miss it. I was just telling Vaughn how much I appreciate all the extra time he's been putting in with you." That's what colleagues do," she said, but her voice sounded strained. "Colleagues," I repeated. "Right. Well, I hope the school appreciates having such a dedicated volunteer. Though I have to ask, Vaughn, are you certified to work with minors? Because I know the district has pretty strict policies about background checks for volunteers." It was a shot in the dark, but it hit home. Vaughn's face went pale, and he glanced around at the other volunteers, who were now listening with undisguised interest. Of course I'm certified," he stammered. "Great. I'm sure Principal Morrison would love to see your paperwork. You know how careful schools have to be these days." I turned to Kelly. "You did make sure all your volunteers were properly vetted, right? I'd hate for there to be any liability issues." Kelly's jaw was tight enough to crack walnuts. "Adam, can I speak with you privately?" "Of course." "Vaughn, would you mind checking on your certification status? I'd hate for there to be any problems." I followed Kelly to a corner of the auditorium, aware that half the room was watching our every move. She was practically vibrating with anger, her carefully constructed public facade cracking under the pressure. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she hissed. "Making conversation with your colleague. You're trying to humiliate me." "I'm trying to protect the school from potential liability issues, as a concerned parent." "You're being an ass." "I'm being a husband whose wife is screwing around with a man who may or may not be legally allowed to be around children. Did you even check his background, Kelly? Or were you too distracted by his other qualifications?" She slapped me. Not hard, but loud enough that several people turned to stare. The auditorium went quiet for a moment, the kind of silence that falls when everyone knows they're witnessing something they'll be talking about for months. "Feel better?" I asked, rubbing my cheek. "Go home, Adam." "Actually, I think I'll stay. Tessa's here after all, and someone should keep an eye on the volunteers." I walked away, leaving her standing in the corner, and made my way back into the crowd. The damage was done. By tomorrow, everyone would know that Kelly Porter had slapped her husband at a school fundraiser, and they'd all be speculating about why. But I wasn't done yet. I found Principal Morrison by the dunking booth, watching a line of kids take turns trying to dunk the math teacher. She was a woman in her 50s who'd been running the school with iron discipline and genuine affection for almost 2 decades. "Mrs. Morrison," I said, "could I have a word about volunteer protocols?" 20 minutes later, Vaughn Richardson was quietly asked to leave the fundraiser pending verification of his volunteer certification status. He left red-faced and furious, but he left. Kelly followed him out, abandoning her decoration duties and leaving the other volunteers to speculate about what exactly had just happened. I stayed for another hour, helping clean up and making small talk with other parents, playing the role of the concerned father and community member. By the time I left, I was confident that the story would spread exactly the way I wanted it to, not as the tale of a jealous husband making trouble, but as the story of a responsible parent raising legitimate concerns about school safety. It was a small victory, but it felt like a start. The real war began the following Monday when I got a call from my lawyer. "Adam, we have a problem," Nina Rodriguez said without preamble. "Kelly's filed a restraining order against you. Claims you've been harassing her and her colleagues, making threats, engaging in stalking behavior. That's ridiculous." "Is it? Because she's got witnesses who say you confronted her boyfriend at a school event and had him thrown out. She's got video of you vandalizing his car. She's building a case that you're unstable and potentially dangerous." I sat down heavily in my office chair, staring out the window at the street where I'd lived for 15 years. Kelly was playing chess while I'd been playing checkers, and she was already 3 moves ahead. "What does this mean?" I asked. "It means you need to be very careful about any contact with your wife or anyone associated with her. It means she's probably going for full custody of Tessa and a bigger share of the marital assets. And it means she's trying to paint you as the bad guy in this divorce." "I am the bad guy, apparently." "No, you're the guy who got caught reacting badly to his wife's affair. There's a difference, but the court might not see it that way." I hung up and sat in my office for a long time, thinking about how quickly everything had spiraled out of control. 2 weeks ago, I'd been a married man with a failing business and a teenage daughter who barely tolerated me. Now I was a soon-to-be divorced man with a failing business, a daughter who was embarrassed by me, and a restraining order that made me look like a dangerous stalker. Kelly had outmaneuvered me completely, and she'd done it with the kind of strategic thinking that I should have expected from someone who'd built a successful business while I'd watched mine crumble. But she'd made one mistake. She'd underestimated how much I was willing to lose to make her lose too. I spent the next week digging deeper into Kelly's digital life, using skills I'd developed in my consulting work to track financial transactions, social media activity, and communication patterns. What I found was a web of deception that went far beyond a simple affair. Kelly and Lacey had been skimming money from their business clients, inflating costs and pocketing the difference. Kelly had been using our joint credit cards to finance her relationship with Vaughn, charging romantic dinners and hotel rooms as business expenses. Most damaging of all, I found evidence that Lacey had been encouraging Kelly's affair from the beginning, providing alibis, covering expenses, and actively working to undermine our marriage. It was Lacey who'd suggested Kelly start working out at Vaughn's gym. Lacey who'd recommended the hotel where they'd been meeting. Lacey who'd been feeding Kelly's complaints about our marriage and encouraging her to see Vaughn as an upgrade rather than a betrayal. The more I dug, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about Kelly falling out of love with me. This was about Lacey getting revenge for being fired from my company 3 years ago, and Kelly was either a willing participant or a useful idiot in that revenge. Either way, they'd both underestimated me, and it was time to show them what a desperate man with nothing left to lose could accomplish. The plan came together over several sleepless nights and too much coffee. It was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its scope. Kelly wanted to destroy my reputation and take everything I'd worked for? Fine. But she was about to learn that I'd been in the information business for 20 years, and I knew exactly how to weaponize the truth. Step 1 was the easiest. I leaked Kelly's affair to her biggest client, the Morrison wedding I'd heard her discussing. Not directly, of course, but through a carefully crafted anonymous tip that included photos of Kelly and Vaughn at the motel, time-stamped during what should have been a client consultation. The Morrisons were old-money conservatives who'd hired Kelly specifically because of her reputation for discretion and professionalism. When they discovered their wedding planner was conducting an affair on company time and charging them for hotel rooms where she was meeting her boyfriend, they fired her immediately and demanded a full refund. Step 2 was more complex, but infinitely more satisfying. I'd kept detailed records of Lacey's embezzlement from my company, but I'd never pursued charges because I'd wanted to avoid the publicity. Now I sent those records, along with evidence of her current financial irregularities with Kelly's business, to the state licensing board and the Better Business Bureau. Step 3 was the nuclear option. I compiled everything I'd found about Kelly and Lacey's business practices, their personal lives, and their systematic destruction of my marriage into a comprehensive dossier. Then I sent copies to every major client they'd worked with in the past year, along with a carefully worded letter expressing my concern about their professional ethics and business practices. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't make accusations I couldn't prove. I simply presented the facts and let their clients draw their own conclusions about whether they wanted to continue working with women who demonstrated such a casual relationship with honesty and fidelity. The response was swift and brutal. By the end of the week, Kelly and Lacey had lost 6 major clients and were facing investigations from 2 different regulatory agencies. Kelly's phone rang constantly with cancellations, angry demands for refunds, and former clients who felt betrayed by the revelation that their trusted wedding planner had been lying to them about everything from her availability to her expenses. The local gossip blog that had made me a laughingstock picked up the story, and suddenly Kelly was the one being dissected in the comments section. The narrative had shifted from sad husband catches cheating wife to successful businesswoman revealed as fraud and adulterer. Kelly tried calling me, but the restraining order she'd filed made any direct communication legally problematic. Instead, she sent messages through Tessa, who was caught in the middle of a war she didn't understand and couldn't escape. "Dad, Mom says you're trying to destroy her business," Tessa said one evening when she came home from Kelly's apartment. "She's crying all the time, and Lacey keeps coming over to yell about lawyers and stuff." "I'm not trying to destroy anything," I said, which was technically true. I wasn't trying to destroy Kelly's business. I was succeeding at destroying it. "Then why is everyone saying all this stuff about Mom online?" "Because it's true." Tessa stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. "You're different," she said finally. "Like, scary different." "I'm the same person I've always been." "No, you're not. The old dad would have just been sad and tried to fix things. This dad is—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Mean. Mean." Maybe she was right. Maybe I had become mean. But Kelly and Lacey had been mean first, and they'd been mean in ways that were designed to destroy me slowly, quietly, without giving me a chance to fight back. At least my meanness was honest. "Sometimes being mean is the only way to make people stop hurting you," I said. "Is that what you're doing? Making them stop?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw Kelly's sharp intelligence combined with something that might have been my own stubborn streak. She was trying to understand a situation that most adults would struggle with, and she was doing it while watching both her parents transform into people she didn't recognize. "I'm making sure they can't hurt anyone else the way they hurt me," I said finally. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Kelly and Lacey had been hurting people, their clients, their business partners, their families, with their lies and their schemes. I was just making sure everyone knew about it. Tessa nodded slowly, like she was processing something complicated. "Mom says Vaughn's moving in with her. How do you feel about that?" "I don't know. He's okay, I guess. He keeps trying to be my friend, which is weird, and he uses a lot of hair products." Despite everything, I almost smiled. Hair products are important to some people. I guess. "Dad, are you going to be okay?" The question caught me off guard. When was the last time someone had asked if I was going to be okay? When was the last time I'd even considered the question myself? "I'm going to be fine," I said. "Better than fine." And for the first time in months, I actually believed it. The final act of my revenge came together by accident, which made it even sweeter. I was at Mike's gym, working out my frustration on the heavy bag, when I overheard a conversation between 2 of the other members. "Did you see that video of Richardson getting his ass kicked at the high school?" one of them was saying. "What video?" "Someone posted it on Instagram. He was trying to impress some chick at a school fundraiser and got thrown out for not having proper clearance to work with kids. Dude looked like he was about to cry." I paused my workout, suddenly very interested in their conversation. "Wait, there's video of that?" Oh yeah, it's everywhere. Someone's girlfriend was live streaming the whole fundraiser and caught the whole thing. Richardson's trying to play it cool. Then this dad comes over and starts asking questions, and next thing you know, the principal's escorting him out like he's some kind of predator. I pulled out my phone and found the video within minutes. It had been posted by one of Tessa's classmates and had already been shared dozens of times across various social media platforms. The footage was shaky and the audio was poor, but it clearly showed Vaughn's humiliation at the school fundraiser, complete with his red-faced exit and Kelly's dramatic pursuit. But more importantly, it showed something I hadn't noticed at the time. In the background of the video, you could clearly see Kelly and Vaughn holding hands and standing much closer than professional colleagues should. To anyone watching the video, it was obvious that they were romantically involved, which made Vaughn's presence at a school event as Kelly's volunteer coordinator look even more inappropriate. I shared the video to my own social media accounts with a simple caption: "Protecting our kids means asking the right questions about volunteers." Within hours, it had been shared hundreds of times throughout our community. Parents who'd been at the fundraiser started commenting with their own observations about Kelly and Vaughn's behavior. Someone dug up photos from other community events where the two of them appeared together, creating a timeline of their relationship that made it clear the affair had been going on much longer than Kelly had admitted. The video went viral by small-town standards, and suddenly everyone in the city was talking about Kelly Porter's affair with an uncertified volunteer who'd been working around children. The narrative had shifted completely. I was no longer the crazy husband who'd vandalized a car in a motel parking lot. I was the concerned father who'd protected the community's children by asking tough questions about volunteer screening. Kelly's reputation was in ruins. Her business was destroyed. Her relationship with Vaughn was public knowledge and widely condemned, and I was being praised as a responsible parent and community member. It was everything I'd wanted, and it felt exactly as empty as I'd expected it to. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Kelly's restraining order was dismissed when it became clear that I hadn't actually threatened or harassed anyone. I'd simply asked questions and shared publicly available information. Her demand for full custody of Tessa was rejected when the court learned about her affair and the instability it had brought into our daughter's life. In the end, we split everything down the middle, just like Kelly had originally suggested. The house, the savings, the debt, all of it divided equally between two people who'd spent 22 years building a life together and 6 months tearing it apart. Kelly moved in with Vaughn, whose personal training business had suffered almost as much as her event planning company. They were still together, as far as I knew, but their relationship had been poisoned by the circumstances of its exposure. It's hard to build a future with someone when everyone knows how your relationship started. Lacey's business license was revoked, and she moved to another state to start over. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd found work with a catering company in Colorado, but I didn't particularly care. She'd gotten what she deserved, and she was no longer my problem. Tessa split her time between Kelly's apartment and my house, adapting to the new reality with the resilience that teenagers somehow manage to summon when their world falls apart. She was still embarrassed by the whole situation, but she'd stopped treating me like I was the villain in her story. "You know," she said one evening while we were eating dinner together, "Jenny's parents got back together. That's nice for Jenny. Do you think you and Mom will ever get back together?" I looked at my daughter, trying to figure out how to explain that some things, once broken, can't be repaired. That some betrayals cut too deep to heal. That some people, when they show you who they really are, should be believed the first time. "No," I said finally, "we won't." Because of what she did? Because of what we both did. It was the most honest answer I could give her. Kelly had cheated, lied, and tried to destroy me in the divorce. But I'd responded by systematically dismantling her life, her business, and her reputation. We'd both chosen revenge over reconciliation, destruction over healing. We'd both gotten exactly what we'd asked for, and we'd both lost everything that had ever mattered. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Kelly at the grocery store. She looked tired, older, like the stress of the past year had aged her in ways that went beyond simple time. She was alone, pushing a cart full of generic brands and store-label products, a far cry from the organic name-brand lifestyle she'd maintained during our marriage. "Adam," she said, and there was something in her voice I couldn't identify. Regret, maybe, or just exhaustion. "Kelly." We stood in the cereal aisle, two people who'd once shared everything and now had nothing to say to each other. The silence stretched between us, filled with all the words we'd never spoken and all the chances we'd missed to be better than we were. "How's Tessa?" she asked finally. "She's good. Made honor roll this semester." "That's good. That's really good." More silence. I could see other shoppers glancing at us, recognizing us from the gossip and the drama that had consumed our small town for months. We were local celebrities now, famous for all the wrong reasons. "I should go," Kelly said finally. "Yeah, me too." She started to walk away, then stopped and looked back at me. "Adam, I'm sorry for all of it. I know that doesn't change anything, but I wanted you to know." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She walked away, and I stood there in the cereal aisle, surrounded by colorful boxes and bright marketing promises, trying to figure out how I felt about her apology. Sorry didn't bring back our marriage. Sorry didn't undo the lies, the betrayal, the systematic destruction we'd inflicted on each other. Sorry didn't give Tessa back her intact family, or restore the life we'd built together over 2 decades. But maybe sorry was enough to let me stop being angry. Maybe it was enough to let me start figuring out who I was going to be now that my revenge was complete and my marriage was over. I finished my shopping and drove home to my empty house, where I sat on my couch and tried to remember what I'd wanted out of life before everything went wrong. It had been so long since I'd thought about anything other than Kelly's betrayal and my response to it that I'd forgotten what my own dreams looked like. Maybe it was time to remember. Maybe it was time to stop being the villain in someone else's story and start being the hero in my own. The next morning I called Mike at the gym. "I want to buy in as a partner," I told him. "You sure about that? It's not exactly a gold mine." "I'm sure. I need to do something that matters. Something real." "Real, huh? Well, this place is definitely real. Real sweat, real work, real people trying to become better than they were yesterday. That sounds exactly like what I need." 6 months later, Mike and I had expanded the gym, added new equipment, and started offering classes for kids and seniors. It wasn't glamorous work, and it wasn't making me rich, but it was honest. Every day people came in looking to improve themselves, to become stronger, to work through their problems with their fists instead of their words. I understood that impulse better than most. Tessa started working out at the gym after school, learning to box from Mike, and developing a confidence I'd never seen in her before. She was still embarrassed by her parents' very public divorce, but she was learning to channel that embarrassment into something productive. "Dad," she said one evening after a particularly intense workout, "do you regret what you did? To Mom and Lacey and Vaughn?" I thought about it while I unwrapped her hands, considering the question seriously. Did I regret destroying Kelly's business? Did I regret exposing Lacey's embezzlement? Did I regret humiliating Vaughn at the school fundraiser? "No," I said finally. "They made choices, and I made sure there were consequences for those choices. The only thing I regret is that it took me so long to stop letting people walk all over me." "But you hurt them. They hurt me first, and they hurt you, and they hurt their clients, and they would have kept hurting people if someone hadn't stopped them." Tessa nodded slowly, processing this. "So you were like a superhero?" I laughed, surprising both of us. "More like a supervillain who happened to be fighting worse villains." That's still kind of heroic. Maybe she was right. Maybe there was something heroic about refusing to be a victim, about fighting back when people tried to destroy you, about making sure that actions had consequences, even when those consequences were ugly. Or maybe I was just a man who'd been pushed too far and had pushed back harder than anyone expected. Maybe the difference between a hero and a villain was just a matter of perspective, and I'd been both depending on who was telling the story. Either way, I was done being anyone's victim. I was done being the punchline to someone else's joke. I was done letting people underestimate me, manipulate me, or treat me like I didn't matter. Kelly had wanted a villain. She'd gotten one. But she'd also created something else, a man who finally understood his own worth and was willing to fight for it. That night, I stood in my garage, looking at my old F-150. The transmission leak had been fixed months ago, but I'd kept the truck as a reminder of where I'd come from and how far I'd traveled. It wasn't much to look at. Dented, faded, showing its age in a dozen different ways. But it ran. It did the job it was built to do. It had survived everything life had thrown at it and kept moving forward. Just like me. I climbed into the truck and drove through town, past the motel where this had all started, past the school where I'd made my first stand, past the courthouse where my marriage had officially ended. The streets were quiet, most people safe in their homes with their families, living the kind of ordinary life I'd once taken for granted. I didn't miss that life as much as I'd expected to. It had been built on lies and compromises, sustained by willful blindness, and the kind of comfortable numbness that people mistake for happiness. This new life was harder, lonelier, but it was honest in a way the old one had never been. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike. "Good workout tonight. See you tomorrow." Another text from Tessa. "Thanks for dinner. Love you, Dad." A third text from an unknown number. "Is this Adam Porter? I saw your gym's website. I'd like to talk about training. New clients, new challenges, new opportunities to help people become stronger than they were yesterday." It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was the life I'd earned through fire and fury, and the kind of revenge that changes everyone it touches. I drove home through the quiet streets of my small town, past houses full of people who knew my story and had opinions about the choices I'd made. Some of them thought I was a hero. Some thought I was a villain. Most probably thought I was just another casualty of modern marriage, another man who'd lost everything when his wife decided she could do better. They were all right, and they were all wrong. I wasn't a hero or a villain or a victim. I was just a man who'd been pushed past his breaking point and had discovered that breaking points aren't always endings. Sometimes they're beginnings. Sometimes they're exactly what you need to become who you were always meant to be. I pulled into my driveway, turned off the engine, and sat in the quiet darkness for a moment, thinking about the future. Tomorrow I'd go to the gym, help people work through their problems with sweat and determination. Tomorrow I'd have dinner with my daughter and listen to her talk about school and friends and all the ordinary dramas of teenage life. Tomorrow I'd continue building something new from the ashes of everything I'd lost. Kelly had thought she was trading up when she chose Vaughn over me. Lacey had thought she was getting revenge when she orchestrated my humiliation. They'd both underestimated the man they were trying to destroy, and they'd both paid the price for that mistake. But their real mistake wasn't underestimating me. Their real mistake was thinking that destroying someone's life was a game they could win without consequences. They'd forgotten that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and that sometimes the reaction is delivered by someone with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. I got out of the truck and walked toward my house, leaving the past in the driveway where it belonged. Behind me, the engine ticked as it cooled, a familiar sound that reminded me of all the late nights I'd spent in the garage, trying to fix things that couldn't be fixed. But some things could be fixed. Some things could be made stronger after they'd been broken. Some people could rise from the ashes of their old lives and build something better from the ruins. I was living proof of that possibility. Inside my house, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down at my computer to review the gym's financial reports. Business was good, better than Mike had ever managed on his own. We were helping people, making a difference in the community, building something that mattered. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was a life I'd chosen after I'd learned who I really was and what I was capable of when pushed to my limits. It was a life built on truth instead of lies, on strength instead of weakness, on the hard-earned knowledge that sometimes the only way to stop being a victim is to become something more dangerous than the people trying to victimize you. Kelly and Lacey and Vaughn had wanted to destroy me, and in a way they'd succeeded. The man I'd been before, passive, trusting, willing to be taken advantage of, was gone forever. In his place stood someone harder, smarter, more willing to fight for what mattered. They'd created their own worst enemy, and I'd made sure they knew it. The coffee was bitter, but I drank it anyway, savoring the harsh taste that matched my mood. Outside, the town slept peacefully, unaware that one of their neighbors was sitting in his kitchen at midnight, reflecting on the beautiful completeness of his revenge and planning an even better future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to prove that some people are stronger than the worst things that happen to them. I was ready for all of it. I finished my coffee, turned off the lights, and headed upstairs to bed. In a few hours, the sun would rise on another day in my new life, and I'd be ready to meet it head-on. After all, I'd learned something important about myself over the past year. I was much better at being the villain than I'd ever been at being the victim. And if that's what it took to protect myself and the people I cared about, then I was perfectly comfortable being the bad guy in someone else's story. Because in my story, the one that mattered, I was finally, undeniably, the hero.